Welcome to
Only Murders in the Building,
the official podcast.
Join me, Michael Cyril Creighton, as we go behind the scenes with some of the amazing actors, writers, and crew from season 5.
The audience should never stop suspecting anything.
How can you not be funny crawling around on a coffin?
No, that's true.
Catch Only Murders in the Building official podcast, now streaming wherever you get your podcasts. And watch Only Murders in the Building, streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. Well, like many across the country and the world, I'm still in shock over the brutal political assassination of my good friend Charlie Kirk. I didn't really know Charlie Kirk until he reached out to me after that fateful morning of January 25th, 2019, when 29 heavily armed FBI agents in full SWAT gear and brandishing fully automatic M4 assault weapons swarmed my home to arrest me for the alleged first-time nonviolent crime of lying under oath before the House Intelligence Committee regarding Russian collusion that we now know definitively never actually happened. Charlie Kirk contacted me and became both a public and private advocate for clemency in my case, yes, a full and unconditional presidential pardon. And this was at a time that many stupid Republicans were saying, oh, let Mueller do his job. This was a con job from the beginning. There was never any probable cause to justify the appointment of Robert Mueller or the witch hunt in which they attempted to undo the results of the 2016 election, which they had shockingly lost. I point out that Charlie Kirk took up for me and my family long before a federal judge ordered the Biden Justice Department to release the fully unredacted results of Robert Mueller's final report, in which even he couldn't sugarcoat the fact that he had found no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other actual crime on my part. I think most Americans know today that I was prosecuted and persecuted because I refused to be the ham in Mueller's ham sandwich. That is to say, once he spent $30 million, never finding any evidence whatsoever of so-called Russian collusion, they wanted to fabricate it. They wanted me to bear false witness against the president. They wanted me to become Michael Cohen, but they had the wrong guy. You see, I'd already passed 2 polygraph tests, and I was never going to bear false witness against the president of the United States. President Trump praised me at the time for my guts, but I was a man staring into the abyss until Charlie Kirk came publicly and privately to my side. Little did I know that Charlie Kirk would ultimately go down in history, as he has now, along with Barry Goldwater, Bill Buckley, Ronald Reagan, and yes, Donald Trump, as one of the most significant figures in America's conservative movement. Those who thought that they were silencing Charlie Kirk with his brutal murder don't understand how they have made his voice even louder and stronger. An incredibly moving and eloquent speech by his wife, Erica, his devoted wife, Erica, last week, and as we'll report to you later in today's show, the significant expansion of the Turning Point USA movement. They have ignited a national phenomena, a firestorm of indignation. But you notice the difference between the left and the right. When George Floyd was killed, the cities were on fire. The results, the reaction of the left was mayhem, destruction of millions of dollars of both public and private property, the injury of thousands, the death of hundreds, in an effort to burn down half the country. Whereas On the right now, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's brutal murder, we have prayer vigils, not just in the United States, but across the world. And it is heartening to see this resurgence, because Charlie Kirk fused not only reverence for free speech, free enterprise, capitalism, and the U.S. Constitution, but he fused it with a deep and abiding belief in God and faith in Jesus Christ. And that is what gave his message on the campuses and on his show lift. The Deputy White House Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, joined a special edition of Charlie Kirk's show today, hosted by Vice President J.D. Vance himself, and vowed that the Trump administration will now channel all the anger over Charlie Kirk's assassination into destroying the left-wing terror networks of the United States. What do we mean by that? Well, Antifa is a terrorist organization. It is time to classify them as such. It is time to hunt down those who have been funding this spasm of violence and this subversion, cut off their funding and prosecute those responsible for this mayhem. Let's listen to the words of J.D. Vance, who I think sums up this moment extremely well.
There is no unity with people who scream at children over their parents' politics. There is no unity with someone who lies about what Charlie Kirk said in order to excuse his murder. There is no unity with someone who harasses an innocent family the day after the father of that family lost a dear friend. There is no unity with the people who celebrate Charlie Kirk's assassination. And there is no unity with the people who fund these articles, who pay the salaries of these terrorist sympathizers, who argue that Charlie Kirk, a loving husband and father, deserved a shot to the neck because he spoke words with which they disagree. Did you know that the George Soros Open Society Foundation and the Ford Foundation, the groups who funded that disgusting article justifying Charlie's death, do you know they benefit from generous tax treatment? They are literally subsidized by you and me, the American taxpayer. And how do they reward us? By setting fire to the house built by the American family over 250 years. I am desperate for our country to be united in condemnation of the actions and the ideas that killed my friend. I want it so badly that I will tell you a difficult truth. We can only have it with people who acknowledge that political violence is unacceptable, and when we work to dismantle the institutions that promote violence and terrorism in our own country.
That was Vice President J.D. Vance. I met with the Vice President only days ago. I must tell you, I'm increasingly impressed with him, with his energy, with his commitment. I think, like a good Vice President, he's very, very effective behind the scenes. He understands that his role is a supporting role, as the role of all Vice Presidents are, but he's extraordinarily effective, and he's very, very committed to the success of the Trump-Vance administration. Stephen Miller, the Deputy Chief of Staff of the White House, joined the Vice President to discuss his friendship with the late Turning Point founder and how the Trump administration is going to end the terrorism against conservatives in the wake of his murder. Charlie was, of course, assassinated by a left-wing terrorist, later identified as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, during a speaking event at Utah Valley University last Wednesday. The shooter was revealed by law enforcement to have engraved his ammunition casings with Antifa and allegedly transgendered slogans. The Wall Street Journal reported that, but then not everything reported in the Wall Street Journal is true. In fact, a closer examination shows that there may have been Antifa slogans, but I think the transgender claim is not yet confirmed. After a 33-hour manhunt, Robinson was turned over to authority. It was later revealed that Robinson lived with a romantic partner, Lance Twiggs, a male who was transitioning to become a female. Some in pro-trans online circles appear to have advanced knowledge of the plot and later celebrated the horrific murder. Trump on Sunday confirmed that a large number of leftists and those funding the left-wing violence are already under major investigation. President Trump last month called for far-left billionaire George Soros and his son Alex Soros to be investigated and charged under the Racketing, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act, or a RICO charge, for being the main funders and supporters of violent far-left rioters. As I said, the 31-year-old conservative leader leaves behind his beloved and devoted wife, Erica, and 2 very young children. I'm haunted by that video that so many of you have seen of Charlie's infant daughter running and being swept up in his arms. I cannot imagine the pain of his family. All of us have our hearts at this point bleeding for Charlie Kirk and his family. But he will not have died in vain. In fact, he has ignited a movement beyond all imagination. There is going to be an explosion of young people who sign up in this movement for freedom, devotion to the Constitution, and yes, belief in God. Charlie Kirk will not have died in vain. In fact, he will now go down in history as one of the great icons of the pro-freedom movement. And I'll see my friend Charlie Kirk again someday when we are both in heaven. This is what I pray for. I'm Roger Stone. You're in the Stone Zone, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. For those New Yorkers who believe that New York state government, who has to give both authority and funding to New York City government, would serve as a check on New York's would-be radical leftist mayor, Zohran Mamdani, I think you will be deeply disappointed. New York Governor Kathy Hochul, perhaps the worst governor in New York state history, a gift left to us by Andrew Cuomo, who selected her for lieutenant governor. She, of course, became governor upon his resignation. Andrew Cuomo, who resigned as governor of the Empire State because he would have been impeached by his own party had he not done so in the wake of Me Too claims against him by various women. Kathy Hochul today endorsed the Ayatollah Zohran Mamdani for New York City mayor, officially giving him the rubber stamp and therefore the rubber stamp of the Democrat establishment to this far-left Islamist. Hochul wrote the following about Mamdani in a New York Times op-ed. In our conversation, she said, I heard a leader who shares my commitment to New York, where children can grow up safe in their neighborhoods and where opportunity is within reach for every family. I heard a leader who's focused on making New York City affordable, a goal I enthusiastically support. I think that is a weird caricature of the actual positions of Mamdani, who has admitted that his solution to his give away everything free policies is to raise taxes on white people. His words, not mine. A man who only days ago said in an interview that he saw no purpose in incarcerating dangerous and violent criminals other than the fact that it makes the victims feel good. This guy's last chance to beat him was in the Democrat primary, and that did not happen. Now, of course, with opposition to Mamdani split between 3 candidates, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who seems to me to be out of gas, current Mayor Eric Adams, mired in scandal after scandal, and my friend Curtis Sliwa, the Republican nominee. It appears to me that Mamdani is highly likely to win this contest. In response to Governor Hochul's comments, Representative Elise Stefanik, a serious contender for the Republican nomination for governor of New York in 2026, blasted Governor Hochul for, quote, putting criminals and communists first and New Yorkers last. Congresswoman Stefanik is absolutely correct. Mamdani's dangerous socialist ideology is at the core of the Democrat movement now. The party establishment has created a monster, and all they can do is appease the monster in the hopes that they can cling to power. Hopefully, New York City will reject Mamdani at the polls this year, but, well, folks, it's not looking good. Meanwhile, low IQ Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the epitome of the DEI movement, appeared on a podcast where Crockett said she takes no responsibility for the toxic rhetoric that led us to the rising wave of terror throughout the country and indeed the brutal public murder of my friend Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA. Crockett said, me disagreeing with you, me calling you, want to be Hitler, all of those things are not necessarily saying go out and hurt somebody. Well, I kind of disagree. For years now, we have been called Nazis, fascists, white supremacists, bigots. You know the drill. And of course, we are none of those things. Crockett claimed, because President Trump joked about beating guys up at his campaign rallies, that he is the one who fomented a culture of political violence. Crockett, frankly, is so dumb she doesn't realize that by calling a political figure like the President Hitler and calling his supporters like me Nazis, they are inherently justifying violence against us, even murder, because wouldn't you all go back in time and kill baby Hitler if you could? Calling people a Nazi in a coordinated fashion, is, as the Democrats have done, is opening the door to them being targeted. That is exactly what has happened. Democrats cannot escape their culpability for what happened to Charlie Kirk. In fact, they are responsible for it. Their denialism tour is not being received well nationwide, and now the tables are suddenly being turned. We saw lives being destroyed, people being debanked, people being arrested, people losing the right to use Uber even in the wake of January 6th, a terrific piece by Julie Kelly that I read today. And now the tables are turned, and those who are celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk are finding themselves being terminated, themselves being discredited. I'm not for censorship, but I do think that there are bounds. Meanwhile, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's horrific murder, it's very clear that nobody did more than Charlie Kirk to rally young people on behalf of the cause of conservatives. But now, in death, he's inspired even more young people to get involved in the fight to save our country. Turning Point USA spokesman Andrew Colvett stated on Sunday the organization has received an incredible 32,000 requests to start new chapters, get involved in active chapters throughout the country. This is expected to turbocharge Turning Point's Club America project, which is Charlie Kirk's vision to have a chapter at every high school across the country. I think this is necessary to combat the Marxism and progressivism being forced on students in the public school system. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone. When we come back, we'll be joined by author Ian Trottier, who has exposed the single biggest villain in the Russian collusion hoax, former CIA Director John O'Brennan. Get ready, because you'll be shocked when you learn about who John Brennan really is.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. This just in, a federal appeals court in the District of Columbia has upheld a lower court ruling in which Judge Gia Cobb ruled that Donald Trump did not have the authority to fire Federal Reserve Board Governor Dr. Lisa Cook, after it was revealed that Cook had engaged in active acts of mortgage fraud. This is not surprising. This is the same U.S. District Appeals Court that upheld the unconstitutional gag order issued against me by the lower court judge in the District of Columbia. I'm highly confident that the U.S. Supreme Court will ultimately correctly rule that President Trump does have the authority to fire a Federal Reserve Board governor for cause, as the law says, but probably not in time for this week's meeting of the Federal Reserve Board, which means it's less likely that there will be an interest rate cut on the American people. The two measures that the Federal Reserve is supposed to use in determining whether the people get a cut in interest rates, both inflation and unemployment today, are both lower or at the same rate as they were the last 4 times the Federal Reserve cut rates. And therefore it is the Federal Reserve Board Chairman, Jerome Powell, who is playing politics with the American economy and trying to thwart the Trump economic boom. All right, joining me now in the Stone Zone is my good friend Ian Trottier. He is a 4th-generation San Francisco Bay native. a 1999 graduate of Oregon. Over the years, he's made a significant contribution to the business community. As a community organizer, been an outspoken advocate for the everyday citizen. But now he's done something extraordinarily important. He has written a new book entitled High Stakes Treason, which is an expose of the arch villain of the Russian collusion hoax, the former CIA director John O. Brennan. Now, I am, first of all, pleased to say that I wrote the foreword for Ian's book, and you can get it, by the way, by going to highstakestreason.com, or you can buy it on Amazon. Now, I knew that John Brennan, when he was the CIA station chief in Riyadh, signed the visas for 4 of the hijackers who were told hit America on 9/11. I knew that John Brennan had been caught red-handed spying on a U.S. Senate committee that was investigating his use of illegal torture. I knew that John Brennan had forced the completely fictitious and fabricated Steele dossier into President Barack Obama's daily intelligence briefing to be used as the rationale for the Russian collusion witch hunt. And I also knew that John Brennan had converted to radical Islam, specifically Wahhabism, in a ritual while he was the CIA station chief. What I didn't know was that, according to this shocking book, High Stakes Treason, that John Brennan conducted a long-term criminal scheme to manipulate intelligence protocols and key counterterrorism personnel to increase the value of stock that he held illegally in order to make millions. Brennan repeatedly filed, or caused to be filed, false official statements to hide his illegal ownership of stock in an indispensable government contracting company while maintaining his control of the initiatives of the Obama administration. A clear conflict of interest. High Stakes Treason lays this all out. Joining me now, the author of this important book, Ian Trottier. Welcome to the Stone Zone.
Roger, it's a pleasure, and I appreciate you having me on. In regards to the Federal Reserve, just quickly, I think the president should have an at-will choice to choose who he wants to run that organization. He shouldn't have to select what is presented to him. But yes, Roger, a year and a half ago at CPAC, I was approached by a former FBI analyst that presented in front of me a binder. And in that binder, I found information that he had collected that showed clearly that former head of the CIA, when he was a senior advisor for the Homeland Security, concocted a scheme. And this was starting officially in 2009 when he signed an ethics waiver, when he agreed, when he was given an ethics waiver, Norm Eisen gave him that ethics waiver. Barack Obama would have signed off on it, stating that he no longer had financial ties to a company, a government contractor that received funding from Congress for the war on terror. And John Donovan states, with the information that I received from John Donovan, I state in High Stakes Treason that he retained financial interest, Roger. He retained financial interest in the Analysis Corporation. That is the government contractor, the critical government contractor, where he is stating that he released all financial control. He was going to liquidate the 401k into an IRA, thus cashing out the stock, which was then at in 2009 worth about $50,000. What we show in High Stakes Treason, what I show, is that at 2013, after the Boston Marathon bombing, that stock value had been cashed out at a value of just shy of $5 million. So how John Brennan compromised American security is meticulously explained in the 430 pages, over 100 pages of an appendix, SEC documents, White House visitor logs, how John Brennan used an unwitting analyst named Michael Jones to cover this scheme. These are heavy allegations, but Roger, what I will say right now is that it is critical. It is critical that this person get to court. And in my understanding, and certainly my research shows, that he needs to be convicted. That's just simply my non-legal, really opinion based on the research. He needs to be convicted, and this is how. This is really important, Roger, because this is how we just lost outside of Donald Trump, one of the biggest voices of our next generation, our early generation, our young generations. We lost the biggest voice in America, a conservative voice, right? So how do we fight back? These people can't. We can't just let these people get away with assassinating our politicians. I mean, not that he was a politician, but it was a political assassination. So how we strike back is we deliver this blow to some of their allies, being John Brennan, as you stated, a known communist sympathizer, a convert to Islam. You're talking about radicalization. We're saying that this Tyler Robinson was radicalized. I suspect that's a smokescreen. Well, John Brennan was radicalized, right? So this person was radicalized, in my opinion. And so this is how we fight back. This is how we take our blood. Is we convict these criminals. We prove that they've committed a crime. We convict them, and they are then dealt with according. And that's according to the Constitution. That's my opinion, and we must push this with all force forward.
Well, Ian, in my book, Stone's Rules, one of the most important rules is use power or lose power. President Donald Trump now has the power to prosecute Brennan, Comey, Clapper, Rice, Biden, Rosenstein, Mueller, Weissman, McCabe. This list, unfortunately, goes on and on. The charge, I think, is seditious conspiracy to engage in treason. Tulsi Gabbard, in a courageous move, has declassified all these documents. Let me point out, President Trump ordered these documents declassified in his first term. The bureaucracy essentially buried that order. Rick Grenell tried valiantly to get this information to the American people, essentially ran out of time. I thought I knew there was everything to know about John Brennan, who I think is the arch villain, the single most important individual in the Russian collusion hoax. I forgot to mention the fact that he is a proud communist. He's admitted this. He admitted it while on a government polygraph. He admits to both being a member of the party and supporting the Communist Party candidate for president of the United States in 2 elections. How does a man who admits to being a communist, a member of the U.S. Communist Party, become the director of Central Intelligence under presidents of 2 different parties? It really does boggle the mind. Yet in this book, High Stakes Treason, which again you can get by going to highstakestreason.com, or you can buy it on Amazon. It is High Stakes Treason by Ian Hamilton Trottier. I learned new things about Brennan that even I didn't know, that he engaged in rank corruption to make millions of dollars while manipulating the counterterrorism protocols of the United States and putting our country into much greater jeopardy. This book specifically shows how Brennan apparently used a single unwitting national intelligence analyst as his personal cutout to implement these new intelligence protocols and hide specific intelligence from the FBI and the CIA, which enabled successful terror attacks against the United States, including the Boston Marathon attack, among others. So this is one of the most important and shocking books that I have read in the 50 years that I have been in American politics.
Roger, this is the most important book of the next 3 years of the current Trump administration. Make no mistake about it. This is the most important book, and what you're talking about here are NSA code word compartments. We know this through Edward Snowden whistleblowing, a program called X-Keyscore. And what we have the ability to do right now with Trump in the office is get Tulsi Gabbard, who would have access to those code word compartments, to expose the crimes that were committed using this Michael Jones analyst through John Brennan. The SEC documents are there. We've got multiple crimes being committed by, allegedly, by this John Brennan. False official statements, financial disclosure forms. I mean, this is a very long list that this person and look, listeners need to understand that I've made an attempt. I've made multiple attempts to engage John Brennan. I made an attempt before the book was published to reach out and get comment from John Brennan. And Roger, I have two journalists, one at the Daily Mail, one at the New York Post, who have articles ready to go. As you can imagine, Roger, this was incredibly difficult to get published. I went through an edit, then we went through a legal vet, then we went through another edit. I was told, quote, Roger, and you and I met and spoke about this briefly, obviously before it was published. I was told, I don't see a way forward with this. And I was relentless. I just said, look, this has got to get out. And the publisher, a great publishing company, Post Hill Press, the imprint is Bombardier Books. That's who's published this work. And they published it. But what we have here are legal departments at the Daily Mail, Roger, and also New York Post with articles ready to go, but their legal team saying, no, we can't do it. Why not? This is freedom of. This is a classic example of how far gone our media system is, how far tainted it is. And the other thing I wanted to mention here, if people pull back and say, and you made a comment about how could this guy, a communist, get into that position of power? My answer to that, Roger, is that our CIA is compromised. That would be completely clear. The CIA has been compromised. So to what level and what elements of the CIA are compromised that would allow this worm? This, what I would call an enemy. Communism is an enemy. Anybody that supports communism is, in my opinion, that has no business living or conducting anything within our borders. We are not a communist nation by any means, not even remotely. And so they don't have any business being in our government. But yet they are somehow. So where is the level of compromisation? We must find it out. We must weed it out, and we must eliminate it, and we must do that very quickly.
All right, we're going to be right back in just a minute with the author of High Stakes Treason. Again, you can get your copy by going to highstakestreason.com. We're going to continue this discussion on the other side. You're listening to the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. We're talking to author Ian Trottier, who has published a bombshell book. I learned things that I didn't know about the arch villain of the deep state, John O. Brennan, the active communist and Islamic convert who improbably served as our CIA director, I think the chief orchestrator of the Russian collusion hoax, which hamstrung the Trump administration for 3.5 long years. All of that now being revealed. We'll be right back in the Stone Zone. Don't touch that dial.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back in the zone. We're talking to Ian Trottier. He is the author of High Stakes Treason, which is a shocking expose of former CIA Director John Brennan. Now, I thought I knew everything there was to know about Brennan. I knew that he was an admitted communist. I knew that he had converted when serving as the CIA station chief in Riyadh to radical Islam in a ritual. He actually became a Wahhabist, which is the most radical brand of radical Islam. I knew that he had signed the visa for 4 of the hijackers who were told attacked America on 9/11. I knew that he had been caught red-handed wiretapping and monitoring a Senate committee that was properly investigating Brennan's use of illegal torture as CIA director. I knew that he was a prime mover of the Russian collusion hoax, and Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, only weeks ago revealed that it was John Brennan who insisted that President Barack Obama's intelligence assessment report include the totally fabricated Steele dossier. The Steele dossier was a complete and total fabrication that was been commissioned and paid for by Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. It was a false assertion that Donald Trump, as a private businessman, had dallied with the Russian prostitutes while visiting Moscow as a private businessman, and had in fact watched these prostitutes allegedly urinating on a bed that had once been occupied by President Barack Obama. This turned out to be a complete and total fabrication. And in fact, when it was finally revealed that Hillary Clinton's campaign had not only paid for this phony dossier, but she'd also hid those payments, calling them legal fees, she actually was required to pay a substantial fine to the Federal Election Commission. My opinion, Ian, the Russian collusion hoax is the single greatest dirty trick in American political history or governmental history. Is nothing less than a massive abuse of power in which the full authority of the U.S. government and the extraordinary capability of our intelligence agencies were used to bring down a duly elected president, Donald Trump. Now, with this new information regarding rank profiteering and corruption by John Brennan, which he enriched himself, at the same time putting America's security at risk, I have to ask you, do you think that this information that you have produced should be used in the charges against him? And have you made an effort to get this information to the current U.S. Justice Department so they can be included in the investigation that I believe, and the grand jury proceedings that I believe are going on right now regarding John O. Brennan?
Yes, thanks, Roger, for asking. I have made an attempt to get electronically get some of these people involved. I've not been able to do that. Now, I was planning to go to D.C. personally and set up appointments. That is my plan, is to go boots on the ground, if you will, well dressed. Anyway, so to get some of these meetings firsthand is my objective. But so far, I have not been able to engage. In fact, I met Pam Bondi a few years ago, so I've got connection to her directly. She hasn't responded. I've been able to engage her, but some type of connection there is what is at my forefront purpose and importance right now, is to get them engaged. Absolutely, the information within this book should serve to get this person indicted. Absolutely, there's no question about it. Robert.
All right, there we have it. We have to wrap it up there. Go to highstakestreason.com. That's highstakestreason.com to get your copy of this blockbuster book. In the meantime, thank you for joining us here in the Stone Zone. God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?